The vastness of space near the Velos star was not quiet. It was filled with the silent, bright flashes of dying ships and the faint, desperate crackle of radio waves. The galactic concordance bastion, called the Eternal Vigil, was a bleeding giant. Its smooth silver hull was now scarred with black burns and jagged holes. Smoke, thick and strange, drifted from some wounds. Inside, the lights were dim and red. The air smelled of burning metal and something sweet like spoiled fruit. Ambassador Kale stood on the command platform. He was tall and thin, with skin like graystone and large, dark eyes that showed no white. His long, three-fingered hands were clasped tightly behind his back. He watched the main screen. A wave of Kaluth ships, shaped like ugly beetles, poured toward them. They moved together, perfectly, like a single mind. Each flash of their green energy weapons meant another concordance fighter was gone. "Defensive line Gamma has collapsed," said a tired voice from a console. The voice belonged to Commander Ellen, a being with feathery growths on her neck that now lay flat with fear. Kale did not answer. He had no orders left to give. They had tried the shield wall formation. It failed. They tried the swift retreat and counter. It failed. They had used logic, perfect formations, and superior energy mathematics. The Kaluth hive mind countered every move effortlessly. It learned, adapted, and consumed. A deep thump vibrated through the deck. Then another. It was the sound of Kaluth boarding pods, like metal seeds, punching into the lower decks. The sound of screaming, clicking, and energy fire began to echo up through the ship's communication channels. It was getting closer. Science Principal Vryn hurried onto the platform. He was smaller than Kale, with smooth blue skin and narrow eyes. He always carried a data slate. Now his hands shook. "Ambassador, the last protective barrier on Deck 9 will fail in 7 minutes. The Kaluth digestive enzymes are highly efficient. There is no way to stop them. I recommend we initiate the self-destruct sequence. We must deny them our biological material and our ship's database." Kale turned his head slowly. His dark eyes looked at Vryn. "Self-destruct? That is your final scientific recommendation?" "It is the logical conclusion," Vryn said, his voice tight. "We cannot win. We can only choose not to be consumed." Kale looked back at the screen. He saw the history of his people. The Velosians were old, peaceful, wise. They helped form the Concordance to bring order to the galaxy. They built beautiful ships and wrote great music. And now they would be eaten by a mindless, hungry thing. It was not a good end. He felt a crushing weight, a despair so deep it was like a cold stone in his chest. His second in command, a sturdy being named Borin, limped forward. One of his 4 arms was missing below the elbow. "Sir, all troops are engaged. We are fighting room to room. But they learn how we fight. They adjust. My soldiers report the enemy now anticipates our standard attack patterns." Patterns. That was the word. The Yaluth defeated patterns. They were the end of logic. A young communications officer, her voice high with panic, suddenly spoke. "Ambassador, I am getting a fragmented signal from the Central Archive. It is a Priority 1 historical file, flagged for catastrophic scenarios. It was buried under old quarantine protocols." Vryn waved a dismissive hand. "This is no time for history." "Play it," Kale said, his voice quiet but clear. The main screen flickered. The image of the Kaluth swarm was replaced by text in the old Concordance script. The title read, "Absolute Containment Protocol, Sol System. Subject, Humanity." Kale's eyes scanned the text. Words and phrases jumped out at him. Species designation, human, Homo sapiens. Threat classification, maximum. Psychological profile. Unstable. Exhibits extreme and unpredictable aggression, not tied purely to survival or resource acquisition. Capable of conceptual hatred and long-term revenge. Tactical analysis. Rejects standard combat logic. Prioritizes psychological impact over tactical efficiency. Demonstrates terrifying adaptability in weaponization of environment. Observed to use sound, light, and biological agents as weapons to induce fear and disorientation. Conclusion. Civilization poses a cascading risk to galactic stability. No integration possible. Quarantine is the only safe option. All access to faster-than-light technology is to be denied. Observation to be conducted from a distance. The file ended with a short video clip. It showed primitive human warriors from their pre-stellar age. They were not just fighting. They were screaming, their faces twisted in rage. They used the broken bodies of their enemies as shields. They set fires in the rain. They fought on, covered in wounds that would stop any logical being. The clip showed a human, bleeding and alone, charging a much larger group with a crude explosive. The final note said, "Containment successful. Soul system blockaded. Last known human subjects placed in cryogenic stasis for study at observation post Kappa, believed to be extinct in active galaxy." The command deck was silent. The only sounds were the distant thumps and the hum of dying systems. Vryn was the first to speak. "Horrifying. Savages. They are monsters from a primitive age. This is what the archive offers us? A history of nightmares?" But Kale was not listening. He was staring at the words, "Rejects standard combat logic." And "unpredictable." Boring grunted, clutching his wounded arm. "They sound worse than the Kaluth. Are they?" Kale asked softly. He turned to face his crew. "The Kaluth is a perfect logical predator. It understands our patterns because we are logical. It eats logic. What does it do with something? Illogical? Something that fights in a way that makes no sense? It would be chaos," Vryn spat. "It would be a crime to unleash such a thing." "Chaos," Kale repeated. He looked at the main screen again, switching the view back to the external cameras. A Kaluth boarding pod, dripping with acid, was carving its way toward the main engineering hull. The end was minutes away. He thought of his homeworld, its quiet cities and glowing fields. He thought of them being dissolved into Kaluth biomass. He thought of the perfect, logical end of the Velocian people. Then he thought of the screaming human in the video, charging forward against impossible odds. There was no good choice. There was only a terrible one. He stood up straight. The weight was still there, but a strange, cold clarity washed over him. His voice, when he spoke, was loud and firm. It cut through the red light and the fear. "Officer, open a channel to the retrieval course. Activate Protocol Omega. Give them the coordinates for the Sol System quarantine zone. Observation post-Kappa." He took a deep breath. The words felt like poison in his mouth, but he said them. "Our strategies have failed. Our logic has failed. Our weapons have failed. There is only one option left." He looked at the horrified face of Science Principal Vryn, at the exhausted hope on Boren's face, and at the bleeding ship around him. Send the order. Our last option. Release the humans. The journey to the Sol System was a frantic blur for the small, fast Concordance retrieval ship. It dodged through contested space, its crew operating in a state of cold dread. They were not scared of the Kaluth alone anymore. They were scared of their own mission. The files on humanity had been circulated among the senior crew. The images of their rage, their crude weapons, their screaming faces were burned into their minds. They were flying to unlock a cage that held, by all accounts, a beast. Observation post Kappa was a lonely, silent needle of metal orbiting a cold, gray rock at the edge of the solar system. It was automated, forgotten for centuries. Its only purpose was to watch a single blue-green world far away, a world that had gone quiet long ago. The retrieval ship docked with a soft clang that echoed in the empty station. Inside, in a chamber kept at near absolute zero, 4 capsules hummed with a faint, failing power. Inside them, 4 humans slept the deep, dreamless sleep of CRYO-STASIS. The leader of the retrieval team, a cautious Tal named Dr. Lyra, followed the old protocols. She initiated the careful, slow thaw. Her hands trembled as she worked. She watched the monitors as heartbeats, slow as a dead moon's orbit, began to pick up pace. Life signs flickered on the screen. They were stronger, more volatile than any concordant species profile. The first human to open his eyes was J. Kim. The lid of his capsule slid back with a hiss. The light was low, but to him, it was a painful stab. He gasped, a raw, ragged sound. His body remembered pain, the cold, and then a different, older pain. His eyes focused on the smooth, gray ceiling. This was not the cryo bay, he remembered. This was wrong. He turned his head. He saw strange, slender figures in form-fitting suits. They had large, dark eyes and faces with no hair. They were not human. A deep, instinctual alarm fired in his brain. Prisoners. Aliens. Experiment. With a strength that surprised even him. He tried to sit up. His muscles screamed, frozen and stiff. A restraining field, a soft blue light, held him down. He thrashed against it once, a pure animal reaction. Then he stopped. His eyes, sharp and dark, scanned the room. He saw the other 3 capsules opening. He saw the technology. He saw the fear in the alien's large eyes. He stopped fighting and started thinking. Minji Park woke up fighting. She didn't know where she was, but she knew confinement. Her last memory was the cockpit of her failing ship, the alarms, the ice creeping up the canopy. She saw the strange faces above her, and she reacted. She swung a fist. It was weak, slowed by the cryosleep, but the intent was clear. It passed harmlessly through the air as the alien Dr. Lyra jumped back with a startled chirp. Minji's eyes burned with anger and confusion. "Get away from me." She slurred, her voice rough from centuries of disuse. The 3rd capsule revealed Taeho Lee. He opened his eyes slowly. He was a big man, broad-shouldered. He did not thrash. He simply looked at the aliens, then at the room, his face calm but watchful. He tested the restraining field with one massive hand, pushing against it. It held. He stopped pushing and lay still, conserving his energy, his quiet gaze taking in every detail. The last was Hana Choi. She woke with a soft cough. Her eyes, quick and intelligent, darted around. She saw the biological scanner one of the aliens was pointing at her. She saw the symbols on the wall, the design of the tools. This was not human. This was advanced. Very advanced. A cold fear, colder than the cryo-fluid, settled in her stomach. But her mind, trained in observation, began working automatically. Different respiratory coverings. They fear our germs. Their suits are environmental. Their posture is defensive. They are scared of us. They were taken, weak and shivering, to a clean room. They were given simple, gray garments. They were offered nutrient paste. Jay looked at the paste, then at the alien who offered it. "Where are we?" he asked, his voice flat. "What is the date?" Dr. Lyra, using a translator device, replied. "You are on a concordance vessel. You have been in stasis for a long time. You are being taken to a safe location." Minji laughed, a harsh, unpleasant sound. "A safe location. You drag us out of ice and put us in a room with a lock on the door. You call that safe?" Taiho ate the paste. He needed strength. Hannah cautiously tasted hers, analyzing its composition. Jay just watched till the journey ended. They were led, under heavy guard, through the damaged, smoky corridors of a gigantic ship. They saw the scars of battle. They smelled the acrid air. They heard the distant sounds of energy welders and cries of pain. This was not a safe location. This was a war zone. Finally, they entered a large room with a wide window showing the stars. In front of it stood two aliens. One was tall and stone-gray, with an air of exhausted authority. The other was smaller, blue, and looked at them with open distaste. "I am Ambassador Kale," the tall one said, the translator making his voice sound soft and weary. "This is Science Principal Vryn. You are aboard the Concordance Bastion Eternal Vigil. We are at war." Jay looked past him, out the window. He saw the damaged hull plates, the floating debris. "You're losing," he said simply. Vryn bristled. "The K-Luth Empire is a relentless foe. Their tactics are predictable," Jay interrupted. He walked forward, ignoring the guards who tightened their grip on their weapons. He pointed to a schematic of a battle on a nearby screen. It showed elegant Concordance ships in a curved defensive line, being slowly enveloped by a cloud of K-Luth drones. You used a crescent formation, a classic defensive posture. It fails when the enemy has superior numbers and can attack from the center and both horns simultaneously. They didn't even need to be clever. They just had to follow the obvious path. He looked at Kale. "You keep fighting them like it's a duel." "It's not. It's an infestation." Minji stepped up next, her eyes on the ship schematics. "Your ships are too smooth. No hard angles, no defensive turret clusters. All forward-facing guns. What happens when they swarm you from the sides? You have to turn the whole ship? That's slow." She shook her head. "Pretty, but stupid." Taiho said nothing. He was looking at a structural diagram of a damaged section, his eyes tracing support beams. Hannah spoke quietly. "The K-Luth. You said they are hive mind? Biological and machine?" Vryn nodded reluctantly. "They are a collective consciousness. They share data instantly. They adapt." Hannah's mind raced. A shared consciousness. A network. It would be efficient. It would also have shared weaknesses. Ambassador Kale felt a strange stirring. These were not the mindless beasts from the video. They were angry, yes, but they were seeing things. They were analyzing the problem in a way no Concordance officer had. "Why did you wake us?" Jay asked, turning his dark eyes back to Kale. Kale met his gaze. "Because we have tried everything. Our logic, our science, our weapons. All have failed. The K-Luth learn our patterns and defeat them. Your file says you have no patterns. You are unpredictable." Minji barked another laugh. "So we're your last option? Your crazy last-ditch weapon?" "Yes," Kale said honestly. "You are." A heavy silence filled the room. Jay looked at Minji, then at Taiho and Hana. A silent understanding passed between them. They were prisoners. They were tools. But they were also, for the first time in centuries, in a position with leverage. Jay looked back at the ambassador. "Okay, we'll look at your problem. But we don't work in this room. And we don't use your tools." He pointed a finger at Vryn. "And he doesn't get to tell us what to do. You give us a workspace. You give us full access to your technical schematics, both yours and the K-Luth. You give us control of a fabrication unit. And you leave us alone." Vryn exploded. "Out of the question. You are dangerous specimens, not allies. You will be given specific tasks under strict supervision." Jay didn't even look at him. He kept his eyes on Kale. "You brought us here Because your way is death. Do you want to try our way? Or do you want to die politely? The distant thump of a K-Luth boarding pod hitting the hull vibrated through the deck. The lights flickered. An alarm sounded faintly. Ambassador Kale, the last hope of his people crumbling around him, made his second terrible decision of the day. He looked at Science Principal Vryn, then at the 4 humans. "Give them what they ask for," he said. Hangar Bay 7 was a mess. It had been a storage area for damaged fighters, but Ambassador Kale had cleared it out. Now it was the humans' workshop. To Science Principal Vryn, it looked like a nest built by insane animals. Concordance technology was clean. It used energy fields, silent fabricators, and holographic interfaces. The humans ignored most of it. They had requested and received raw materials, sheets of metal, spools of cable, containers of chemical compounds, and piles of scrap from destroyed drones and broken ship parts. Jay sat cross-legged on the floor, surrounded by data slates. He was not just reading the K-Luth battle reports. He was watching them like a critic watches a bad play. He saw the patterns. The K-Luth always took the most efficient route. They always targeted power sources and command nodes first. They always moved to surround and isolate. It was perfect, cold logic. Jay began to draw lines on a tablet, not of battle plans, but of chaos. He sketched ideas for traps that had no logical purpose, for maneuvers that looked like mistakes. He called it feeding the enemy a script they can't read. Minji and Taiho were at the large fabrication unit. The Concordance engineers had shown them how to use it to print precise, delicate replacement parts. Minji had immediately overridden the safety protocols. She stood before the control panel, her fingers flying. "We don't need another beam emitter," she muttered to Taiho. "They have 1 million of those. We need impact." On the screen, she designed a projectile. It was not aerodynamic. It was a lump of dense metal with small hooked grooves cut into it. Inside, she programmed pockets for a chemical mixture. Taiho, looking over her shoulder, pointed a thick finger at the blueprint. "The barrel will not hold. The pressure from the chemical reaction will break it after 3 or 4 shots." Minji smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. "We only need it to work once. And we'll make the barrel thicker. Make it ugly." Taiho nodded. He took her design and began modifying the structural supports. He didn't make them elegant. He made them heavy, solid, and brutal. He used triple the amount of material a Concordance engineer would. He didn't care about weight or energy efficiency. He cared about something not breaking when it fired a chunk of metal at an enemy. In a corner, Hana worked with a stolen medical scanner and a small, contained piece of K-Luth biomatter. It was a sample the science team had kept in a stasis field, too scared to study it deeply. Hana wasn't scared. She was fascinated. She watched the cellular structures on her screen. They were tough, fibrous, and they communicated via subtle bioelectrical pulses. They were like neurons and muscles combined. She noticed something. When she played a certain frequency of sound through the sample, the cells momentarily convulsed and lost cohesion. The electrical pulses scattered. It was a vulnerability. The hive mind was connected, but that connection could be jammed. She started designing a small, powerful sonic emitter, not to destroy tissue, but to confuse it. Science Principal Vryn came to inspect after 1 day. He was horrified. The beautiful fabrication unit was now covered in handwritten notes from the humans. The floor was a maze of cables and half-built, ugly devices. One of Minji's first creations sat on a workbench, a standard Concordance handbeam, but its barrel was sawed off and replaced with a crude, wide nozzle. A tank of pressurized gas was welded clumsily to its side. "What is that? Atrocity?" Vryn asked. His voice tight. Minji picked it up. It was heavy and unbalanced. This is for close quarters. The beam is weak against their shells. This, she patted the tank, shoots a cloud of superheated metal dust. It gets in the joints. It blinds their sensors. It cooks them from the inside. That is barbaric, Vryn whispered. Effective, Minji said, putting it down. Vryn turned to Jay. And you? What is your contribution to this mess? Jay looked up from his data slates. I have a question. Your fighters. When they are damaged, what is the protocol? They retreat to the repair bays, of course, Vryn said. Jay nodded. And the Kaeluth drones. When they are damaged? Vryn paused. They are often consumed by other drones for raw material, or they detonate if they cannot function. So, Jay said, leaning forward, your units run away when hurt. Their units blow up. What if we made something that didn't run away when it was hurt? What if we made it fight harder? Vryn just stared, unable to comprehend. The first test came sooner than anyone wanted. A small wave of Kaeluth scouts, like metal insects, broke through a weak point in the outer hull's energy shield. Standard Concordance defense turrets fired precise, blue beams. They would hit a scout, burn a hole in it, and the scout would adapt, shielding that area, and keep coming. Jay got on the comms to the bridge. Ambassador Kale, let us test our modifications on Deck 12. Section Alpha. Give the turret control in that section to us. Kale, his heart heavy, agreed. In the hangar, Minji and Tayo had just finished their first heavy weapon. They had taken a standard point defense turret, a sleek pillar that rose from the floor, and completely gutted it. They replaced the beam emitter with a thick, short barrel from a damaged cargo loader. They wired in a power cell meant for a shuttle engine. On the bridge, they watched the screen. The Kaeluth scouts skittered down the corridor. The human-modified turret hummed, a deeper, rougher sound than usual. It didn't fire a beam. With a deafening boom that shook the deck, it fired a physical projectile, the lump of metal, moving slower than a beam, but with immense force, didn't just hit the lead scout. It smashed through it, turning it into shreds of chitin and fluid, and kept going to hit the one behind it. The impact wasn't clean. It was messy, violent, and loud. Sparks and pieces of Kaeluth drone filled the hallway. The other scouts paused. For a fraction of a second, they stopped their efficient advance. Their behavior was not in their patterns. A projectile weapon of that power was illogical for shipboard combat due to recoil and shrapnel risk. The turret boomed again. And again. It wasn't killing them with efficiency. It was killing them with sheer, brutal force and chaos. After 4 shots, as Tayo predicted, the turret's overloaded barrel cracked with a sound like a bell breaking. It smoked and went silent. But the job was done. The scout wave was destroyed, painted across the walls. The bridge was silent. The Concordance officers looked at the screen, showing the smoky, debris-filled corridor. It was a victory, but it looked like a butcher shop, not a battlefield. Vryn turned to Kale, his face pale. Did you see? They break our own equipment. It is wasteful. It is insane. Ambassador Kale looked from the screen to the feed from the hangar bay. He saw the 4 humans. Jay was nodding, making a note. Minji was already pointing at the broken turret on a schematic, talking fast to Taiho about reinforcing the chamber. Hana was showing them a design for a sonic device to attach to the next one. It was insane. It was wasteful. It was ugly. But for the first time in a long time, the Kaeluth advance had not just been stopped. It had been confused, then smashed into nothing. Kale looked at Vryn. It is also the only thing that has worked. Give them more material. Let them continue. He turned back to the stars. A strange, cold hope beginning to fight the despair in his heart. They had released the humans. Now they were starting to see what that truly meant. The victory of the modified turret was small, but it was a crack in the darkness. It gave the Eternal Vigil a few more precious hours. But on the bridge, the main screen showed the real problem. A Kaluth hive ship, a massive pulsing shape like a cancerous star, had arrived. It did not attack immediately. It began to launch hundreds of boarding pods, a storm of metal seeds aimed at the wounded bastion. This was the end. The hive ship would consume them, digest the Eternal Vigil and all life inside it, and add their mass to its own. Ambassador Kale prepared to give the order for a final desperate charge. A noble, hopeless fight. Then J. Kim's voice came over the combs, calm and clear. Ambassador, do not attack the hive ship directly. That's what it expects. Kale, exhausted, replied, We have no other option, Human J. We must meet our end with courage. You have another option, Jay said. Let us board it. The silence on the bridge was absolute. Science Principal Vryn was the first to sputter. Board it? Board a Kaluth hive? That is a level of madness even I did not predict. It is a living ship. The air is acid. The corridors are its digestive tract. You would be consumed in minutes. On the other end, in the chaotic hangar, Jay was already moving. Exactly. They won't expect it. No logical species would do it. Minji, Taiho, Hannah suit up. The humans did not use the sleek, energy-shielded Concordance armor. Over the last hours, they had built their own. It was ugly. Taiho had taken heavy plates from engineering bulkheads and welded them together into a suit that made him look like a walking furnace. It had no elegant seals, just thick gaskets and crude welds. Minji's suit was lighter, but covered in hooks, clamps, and external pouches holding tools and canisters. Hannah's had a large, boxy backpack housing her sonic emitter array. Jay's was somewhere in between, with extra data ports wired directly into the chest plate. They painted them quickly with whatever was at hand. Streaks of warning yellow, dashes of black. It wasn't for camouflage. It was for identification, and perhaps for psychological effect. They looked like ancient, angry demons. Kale watched them enter the airlock on a monitor. His heart ached. This was a suicide mission, a final violent gesture. He gave the order. A single fast transport shuttle, modified by Minji to be extra armored at the front, shot out from the Eternal Vigil. It flew not away from the storm of pods, but into it, weaving a crazy path towards the giant hive ship. The Kaluth did not stop it. Why would they? It was one small ship flying into their mouth. It was not a threat. It was delivery. The shuttle slammed into the fleshy metal hull of the hive ship, not with a graceful docking maneuver, but with a crash. The humans used cutting torchescrewed, fiery tools the Concordance hadn't used in centuries, to burn their way inside. The interior was a nightmare. The walls were wet, pulsating, and a warm greenish fluid dripped from the ceiling. The air was thick and foul. Hannah's environmental sensors went wild. Acidic, also some kind of neural aerosol. It's trying to pacify us, make us easier to digest. Turn up your filters, Jay said, his voice muffled inside his helmet. Hannah, start the noise. Taiho, point the way. Minji, get the party favors ready. Hannah activated her sonic backpack. A low, discordant hum filled the corridor. It wasn't loud, but it was wrong. The vibration made the wet walls shiver. The fluid dripped faster. They moved. Their plan was not to find the bridge or the engine. Jay had said that was a fool's errand. A hive had no single brain. Their plan was to cause pain. To be a virus. At the first junction, they saw Kaluth worker drones. They were small, many-legged things that scurried along the walls, repairing and cleaning. The drones ignored them at first. Then Hannah aimed a focused sonic pulse. The drones shuddered, their legs twitching uncontrollably. They fell from the walls. Minji stepped forward and sprayed them with a chemical from her canister. It wasn't acid. It was a fast-acting adhesive, mixed with conductive powder. The drones stuck to the floor, twitching, short-circuiting. They moved deeper. They found a wide channel where the green fluid flowed faster. A circulatory system. Taiho pointed to a thick, throbbing tube overhead. That is a major vessel. He planted a small, shaped explosive charge on it, not to blow it up, but to blow a hole in it. The thick, green fluid poured out like a waterfall, flooding the corridor behind them. Let the hive clean up its own mess. They hacked into a communication node, a fleshy lump with glowing fibers. Jay connected a data slate. He did not try to decode their language. He fed it a loop of sound files he had compiled from the Eternal Vigil's archives. The sound of screaming Galosians, the boom of their modified turret, and strangest of all, a clip of harsh, driving human music with a pounding drumbeat and distorted guitars. He played it all on a loop, at maximum volume, directly into the hive mind's network. The effect was immediate. The gentle pulse of the walls around them became erratic. A group of warrior drones, sleek and armed with cutting claws, rounded a corner. Their movements were jerky, uncoordinated. The sonic disturbance and the chaotic noise in their network was confusing them. This was the fight. It was not clean. Minji used her metal dust sprayer, filling the corridor with a burning cloud. Taiho, standing like a wall, used a massive shield he had forged to simply crush drones against the pulsing walls. Jay fired a heavy, solid slug pistol. Each shot a loud crack in the wet air. Hana kept her sonic devices pulsing, a constant disruption. They didn't try to hold ground. They moved, always moving, leaving a trail of damage that made no logical sense. They cut small holes in walls that led nowhere, just to let the acidic air leak into other passages. They lured drones into narrow tunnels, and then collapsed the ceilings on them using Taiho's explosives. They were like a fever dream inside the hive's mind, a confusing, illogical, and painfully loud dream. On the bridge of the Eternal Vigil, the officers watched the sensor readings of the hive ship. Its energy signatures were fluctuating wildly. The storm of boarding pods had slowed, then stopped. The hive ship itself was convulsing. It was turning slightly, its weapons not firing. It seemed to be trying to deal with an internal problem, a catastrophic system failure it could not comprehend. After what felt like an eternity, a single damaged shuttle ejected from the hole the humans had cut. It limped back toward the Eternal Vigil. The hive ship did not fire on it. It continued to pulse erratically, and then, with a slow, ponderous movement, it began to retreat. The gravitational pull on its mass lessened. The remaining K-Luth drones around the bastion drifted, purposeless. Before being picked off by the Concordance guns, the shuttle landed in the hangar. The airlock opened, releasing a puff of foul, acidic air. The 4 humans emerged. Their suits were scorched, dented, and covered in greenish-black fluid. They pulled off their helmets. Their faces were sweaty, smudged with grime, but their eyes were alive. They had not destroyed the hive ship, but they had hurt it. They had confused it so badly that its only logical response was to withdraw and heal. They had turned its own perfect, interconnected mind against it. Using chaos as a weapon. Ambassador, Kale arrived in the hangar, Vryn at his side. Kale looked at the humans, then at their damaged, dripping shuttle. He did not see glorious warriors. He saw something far more unsettling. He saw survivors. He saw a problem that had solved another problem in the most terrifying way possible. Minji caught his look. She wiped a smear of alien fluid from her cheek and gave him a tired, wolfish smile. Told you we'd handle your pest problem, she said, her voice hoarse. The hive ship was gone. The immediate threat was over. But as Kale looked at the 4 humans, standing amid the mess they had made and the mess they had brought back with them, he knew a new kind of fear. They had one, and that was what scared him most. The hive ship was a fading blot on the scanners, retreating into the dark. The eternal vigil was quiet, but it was not a peaceful quiet. It was the quiet of exhaustion and shock. The corridors still smelled of smoke and acid, but now they also carried the heavy silence of a question that had been answered in the most terrifying way possible. The humans were given a clean room near their hangar workshop. They washed the alien fluid from their skin. They ate in silence, their bodies aching with a deep weariness. They had won a battle, but they were still in a cage, just a larger one. The looks from the Concordance crew had changed. The fear was still there, but now it was mixed with awe and a new, deeper unease. 2 days later, Ambassador Kale called them to the main council chamber. It was a large, circular room with a window looking out at the stars. Science Principal Vryn was there, along with other high-ranking officers from different species in the Concordance. Their large, insectoid, or avian faces were all turned toward the 4 humans as they entered. The mood was not one of celebration. It was one of a tribunal. Kale spoke first, his voice weary but formal. "You have done what we could not. You have saved this ship and the lives of everyone on it. The Concordance is in your debt." J. Kim stood with his hands clasped loosely behind his back. He nodded once, a simple acknowledgement. He said nothing. He was waiting. Vryn could not stay silent. Yes, they saved us. By using methods that are barbaric, uncontrolled. They broke our equipment. They introduced chaotic and toxic elements into a combat environment. They bypassed every safety protocol. He turned his narrow eyes on the humans. You are a cascading risk. The containment protocol was correct. You are too dangerous to be free. Minji Park crossed her arms. You wanted the K-Luth gone. We made them go away. You don't get to complain about the method after you get the result. The method is everything. Vryn insisted, his voice rising. We are a civilization of laws and order. What you did, it was not warfare. It was butchery. It was madness made real. Taiho Lee shifted his weight slightly. He did not speak, but his calm, solid presence in the room was a statement. Hannah Choi watched the aliens, her eyes recording every flicker of fear and judgment. Ambassador Kale held up a long-fingered hand. The concern, he said carefully, looking at Jay, is that we have defeated one monster by unleashing another. The K-Luth threat remains. But what is the human threat? Your file says you fight each other as fiercely as you fight outsiders. You hold grudges for generations. How can we trust you? Jay finally spoke. His voice was calm, logical, which somehow made it more frightening. You can't, he said simply. You woke us from a cage to be weapons. You don't trust a missile. You aim it and hope it hits the right target. He stepped forward, pulling a small data slate from his belt. He placed it on the central table. A hologram flickered above it, showing 2 simple options. You have a choice, Jay said. But it is not about trust. It is about management. He pointed to the first option, labeled 1. Option 1. You try to put us back in the cage. You try to disarm us, return us to stasis, or control us. We will now resist. We have studied your technology for a week. We understand your ship's weaknesses, your power grid, your life support. A fight would start today. It would be messy. It would be ugly. You might win. You probably would. But you would lose this ship and most of your crew in the process. And the K-Luth would return to find scraps. The room was deathly still. No one doubted he meant it. J pointed to the second option, labeled 2. Option 2. You accept reality. You cannot control us, so you do not try. You give us a ship, the one we modified. You give us full schematics for your technology and for the K-Luth. You grant the human species a sovereign system, outside concordance space. No oversight, no rules. Vryn gasped. You ask for a kingdom? For weapons? We ask for a home, Jay corrected, his eyes cold. And we ask for the tools to do a job. In return, we will handle the K-Luth. Not as soldiers of the concordance, as independent contractors. You leave us alone. We will leave you alone. And we will make sure the K-Luth are too busy to bother you. You would become a rival power. A plague. Vryn cried. We would become a solution, Jay said. A targeted, self-managing solution. The K-Luth eat order. We are disorder. You point us at them. You get out of the way. Ambassador Kale stared at the 2 options floating in the air. Option 1. More death, more destruction. The sure end of his command and likely his people here. Option 2. An unthinkable deal with a force of nature. To release them fully into the galaxy. It went against every law, every principle of the concordance. He thought of the screaming human in the old video. He thought of the boom of the broken turret. He thought of the hive ship, convulsing from an internal nightmare. He thought of his own quiet, logical world, about to be eaten. He looked at the other council members. He saw fear in their eyes. But he also saw, buried deep, a desperate hope. They wanted to live. They wanted to go home. Kale stood up. He felt very old. He walked around the table until he stood face to face with J. Kim. He saw no hatred there, no anger. He saw only a pragmatic, terrifying clarity. This was not a person to be commanded. This was a force to be bargained with. If we give you this, Kale asked softly, what is to stop you from turning on us once the K-Luth are gone? Minji answered from behind Jay, her voice like steel. Because you're boring. And you're not a threat. You just want to be left alone to be smart and peaceful. We don't care about you. She said it not with malice, but with a simple, devastating truth. The concordance was not a worthy enemy. It was just there. Kale almost smiled. It was the most reassuring thing she could have said. Their danger had direction. It was focused on the fight, on the chaos, not on conquest. He turned to the council. We have voted on war and peace for centuries. Today, we vote on survival. He looked at each of them. I choose option 2. There were protests from Vryn and others. But the vote, when taken, was not unanimous, but it was clear. Fear of the humans in the room outweighed fear of the humans in the future. And so, it was done. A solar cycle later, at the edge of concordance space, a ceremony was held. It was not festive. It was tense. The humans' modified ship, now named the Unyielding, sat in the docking bay. It was no longer a concordance shuttle. It was a patchwork of heavy armor, extra weapon pods, and crude engines. It looked aggressive just sitting still. The 4 humans stood at the airlock. They wore practical clothes, not uniforms. They carried packs with their personal tools and data slates, filled with a library of alien science. Ambassador Kale approached them one last time. He held out a data crystal, the agreed-upon star charts. The system is yours. It has one rocky world that can be made habitable. The schematics for everything you asked for are loaded onto your ship. Jay took the crystal and nodded. The agreement stands. You stay out of our space. We'll handle the K-Luth. There was nothing else to say. No handshakes. No farewells. The humans turned and walked up the ramp into their ship. The airlock sealed with a final, heavy sound. From the bridge of the Eternal Vigil, Kale and Vryn watched the viewscreen. The unyielding slid out of the bay. It did not move with the graceful curves of concordant ships. It moved with a direct, powerful thrust. It turned, presenting its heavily armed flank to the bastion for a moment. And then, with a flash of its overpowered engines, it shot into the darkness of uncharted space. It was gone. Vryn let out a long breath. We have unleashed a storm. What have we done? Kale watched the empty space where the ship had been. He thought of the coming war, not his war anymore. A war of chaos against order. A war of screams and thunder against silent logic. We have survived, Ambassador Kale said quietly. And we have made sure that the next thing the Kaluth hive mind meets will be something it cannot understand. He finally looked away from the stars, a profound tiredness in his soul. The humans are released. Now we wait, and we hope we never see them again.